We're ready. Well, good morning. Thank you all for rescheduling. This is actually our February meeting that we're going to hold today on Monday, March 7, 2022, our DCTA regular board meeting. We have a full quorum today. All members are present. So moving on, I will begin the board meeting. First, let's start with our invocation, and Director Costas has agreed to give our invocation today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Father, once again, we come before your throne of grace. And Lord, just sometimes when we think it can't get any worse, it does. But Lord, this is not new to you. Things are not new to you. There's nothing new under the sun, Lord. But Father, we just come as representatives on this board, as there are elected officials on this board, Father, as the staff and all those present, Lord, we just come humbly asking you, Lord, to give wisdom to those in authority. Father, as we look at what's happening to Russia and what's going on with that, Lord. But once again, these are not things that are surprising to you, but Lord, we pray for the people that are involved at every level. Lord, we pray for their health and their well-being. Father, we know that you care about every detail of their lives and our lives. So Father, as we come together today to reason together on the agenda items listed before us, remind us, Lord, that your wisdom supersedes all things. And our goal here, Lord, is to honor you and to make decisions, Father, that are pleasing to you. So Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for those present. I thank you for those listening by Zoom, Lord. Father, that you would bless each family represented here, Lord, and remind us just, Lord, to hug our family members a little tighter, to give each other smiles, Lord, just to be you to others. And Father, we ask this in the name of your Son, our Lord, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Next is introductions from the board. Does anybody on the board have any introductions? Seeing none. Raymond, do you have any introductions?
It's not an introduction, but it's just a word of grace and thanks to, I'm not sure everyone here knows, but we had a operator who passed away, not this weekend, but last weekend, Mr. Jim Owen. And he was a very faithful servant, a devout believer in Christ, as a Catholic and strong in his beliefs. He contributed to this agency in so many ways, not only with his service, but his service to the community. He was always in support of his fellow employees and certainly gave his all to the very end. And I want to thank him publicly for his years of service and dedication to the agency. He's what public service and servant leadership is all about. And so I want to just thank him.
Thank you, Raymond. Yes, express our condolences from our board to his family.
So here's Mr. Owen, for those of you who may not remember. There are no services planned, but again, as Raymond said, just remembering him and his family in our thoughts and prayers, and I'm gonna miss the heck out of this guy.
Okay, our next item is public comments. Let me read this. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the board of directors on any items or other matters related to DCTA. Anyone wishing to speak will be having a 3-minute limit, shall be courteous and cordial. Any person who wishes to address the board of directors regarding any items may do so by completing the request for speaker card prior to the meeting or by utilizing the raise hand function of the Zoom meeting. At this time, citizens that are not able to connect to the Zoom meeting must email or provide comments to Keisha no later than 3 p.m. on Friday, March 4th to ensure that your comments will be read. And there is a note effective September 1st, 2021 Audio only is no longer allowed, therefore full video will be required when speaking to the board. Board of Directors is not permitted to take any actions on any subject raised by a speaker during the public comments. However, the Board of Directors may have the item placed on a future agenda for action. Reference the item to DCTA administration for further studies or actions, briefly stating existing DCTA policies are provided, brief statements for factual information to respond to the inquiry. So at this time, I'm going to ask Keisha, do we have any speakers?
We did not receive any via email. However, we do have a person who has raised their hand and has the attendance, and her name is Eva Greco.
Okay.
And I heard that y'all go ahead. and allow her.
Yes, let's ask Ms. Greco to speak before us. Good morning. Are you on?
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry about that.
Good morning.
My name is Eva Greco. I live in the city of Denton. I received an email from DCTA about service and schedule changes for mostly for the buses I'm looking here. And everything I see is bus routes starting later, ending earlier, wait times increasing, departure times increasing. As I've stated before, DCTA is sabotaging the bus service in preference for Go Zone. This is not a way to work together with the riders and just the citizens of all the different towns utilizing public transportation. It's another step backwards for mass transportation. I don't understand why the Go Zone is getting all this attention and the buses are just basically being sabotaged. And I know I'm repeating myself on that, but there's no other way to say it. I'm sorry, but this is just, this is bad. Mr. Suarez, I've addressed you previously. I've spoken with you, dealt with you numerous times regarding Go Zone. I have been out, just basically lied to. And I'm sorry, but these shady backroom deals that were made is atrocious, and all it's doing is hurting the people by dealing with these nefarious people from VIA. And if anything, Mr. Suarez, I would ask for your removal. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Chair. I know we can't speak directly to Ms. Greco, but I would please encourage staff to reach out to her and discuss what has precipitated the changes in bus schedules. That's not a board level decision that actually gets done by staff. So I would encourage you guys to reach out to her if you can, and you may have already. So thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, sir, the board was presented all the changes. If I may address the board was presented all changes. There's nothing that has been withheld from the public through the board meetings, through this board. I think everybody here is well informed of the decision-making process. Go Zone continues to do a very good job. You will be presented today with what this board agreed to, which is alternatives to route definitions, comprehensive operational analysis that is going to be performed. Like any operational analysis we do, we fully engage the public with their participation. We will reach out to Ms. Greco directly, but I feel that what's been addressed with the board with regard to the changes have been fully disclosed, not only to the board, but to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Keisha, do we have any other public speakers?
Do not see anyone else.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that concludes our public comment portion of our meeting. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. This is items that are standard operating procedure for our board and are taken as one motion unless someone on the board would like to remove an item for additional consideration. At this time, I'll take any motions or actions from our board members. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. Director Costas. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we'll move into our regular agenda. Item number 1 is a presentation on the audit report, fiscal year ending September 30th, 2021 by Plant Moran, and consider approval of the FY 2021 financial statement and supplemental information. Presenters will be Amber Karkauskas and Keith Szymanski.
Good morning. Yes, sir. At our last meeting on January 27th, we brought before the board the draft of the fiscal year 2021 annual comprehensive financial report. Today on pages 37 through 121 of your packet, we present the final ACFR, which in addition to the independent auditor's report, the basic financials and notes, and the required supplemental information sections, the letter of transmittal, the management's discussion and analysis, and the statistical sections are now presented, as well as the final single audit report and the Plant Moran's report to the board. And as you said, right with us today, presenting the conclusion of the audit process is Keith Szymanski, who is the senior manager over the audit. So I turn it over to him.
Thank you, Amber. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you again. You'll likely recall that my colleague Amy and I were with you at the January meeting to go over the results of the audit based on our preliminary drafts. Those were since finalized in early February, and there were no significant changes to the highlights and the comments that we went over in the January meeting. So I have once again just a short PowerPoint presentation, shorter than the January version, to recap the highlights from that meeting and again open it up for questions at the end. So there were 3 deliverables as part of the audit, which we'll go into in more detail in the next few slides. So if we click to the next one on the independent auditor's report, it was once again an unmodified opinion, the highest level of assurance that we can give to a set of financial statements. So that does indicate that it was a clean audit report and that the readers can rely on the data and information that follows. We mentioned there was an emphasis of matter paragraph this year due to a fairly technical reporting change as to how the North Texas Mobility Corporation is reported now on a combined basis with DCTA in the front statements. The second deliverable, the report to the board, includes 2 sections, the first of which is required under the auditing standards. That's where we would be required to report if there were any disagreements with management, any misstatements that we identified as part of the audit, or any difficulties in performing the audit. And I'm happy to report there are none of those. It was a very smooth audit process. And then section 2 is simply informational items that we thought might be of use to DCTA management and the board. And our third deliverable was the single audit report, which relates to DCTA's compliance with federal spending, of which there was about $21 million in the 2021 fiscal year, including nearly $17 million related to the CARES Act. It is in this report where we would include any findings related to internal controls, whether they relate to the financial statement audit or the federal compliance audit. And I'm happy to report that there were none of those. So that goes to tell you, not only did you receive the unmodified opinion, the clean audit report, but there were no significant difficulties, nothing that we identified as part of the audit that DCTA had to correct that we need to bring to your attention or report to the federal awarding agency. So lastly, we have just a few closing comments, including the fact that although the audit's complete, there is one piece of the engagement still to be completed. It's a set of agreed upon procedures we do related to the National Transit Database filing, and that's due in May. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of months. And then finally, a major thank you to the finance department and the others that we worked with as part of the audit. As you know, this was Plant Moran's first year completing the financial statement audit. Often there can be some difficulties, some growing pains to work through as we go through the process together for the first time. But in terms of first year audits, this was about as smooth as it could go. And so we thought everyone that we worked with was extremely cooperative and accommodating. And as I've said a couple of times, but it's worth repeating, the audit was very smooth and very clean. We couldn't have done that without the cooperation of everyone at the authority. So we thank them for that. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Keith. Is there any questions from the board? Comments?
I did have one question. I had expressed some concern about lumping NTMC into this report last time. What did you guys come up with as far as review?
See how they laid it out on page. The explanation of it. I do not have any legal concerns with it being incorporated in this.
Okay, super. Thank you. Short, sweet, to the point. Really appreciate that.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, want to thank Marissa, Amber, Raymond for a very smooth internal audit. Thank you. Let's move on to item then number 2, mobility service update. Javier Trila will be our presenter today.
Good morning, board. As Raymond noted earlier, I'll be presenting a full update on mobility services today, including Go Zone performance, the upcoming comprehensive operations analysis, and also a quick overview and briefing on the March service changes that we agreed upon in December. Next slide,
Just a
please.
second.
Yes.
Hold on, Javier. Yes.
Yeah, we need to go ahead and approve the financial statements, supplemental information.
An action item.
It's an action item.
Sorry.
Motion to
My
approve.
mistake.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Just wanting to see if you're on.
So motion
Oh, that credit goes to
has
you, sir.
approved. So
Poor chair.
thank you. Regular, it's an action item even.
Thought you will never know.
Thank you all.
Keisha,
Keep-
please speak
keep
up
me
with
up.
that
So thank you. Now back to Javier. This is a discussion item.
No worries. Next slide, please. Just wanted to provide some quick call outs from the Go Zone dashboard this month. Overall ridership at the time of the snapshot was approaching 200,000 total rides. Obviously, this is a little bit behind at this point. By the end of February, we'd already moved past 200,000 rides. We'd already surpassed that number. And while this dashboard does represent figures since service launch, we keep on tweaking it and adjusting it to make sure that it's more relevant, just making sure certain data points more accurately reflect what's actually happening with the service. Items such as wait times were reconfigured to show the rolling past 3 months to give a little bit better picture to what service performance looks like. Right now, we're looking at about 20 minutes to pickup time, as well as, and actually I wanted to call out real quick, the average pickup distance is not in feet, it's in meters, and we'll be correcting that label for moving forward. We're still working with Accenture to migrate this dashboard to an internal state to make it more widely available to both staff and the board. I don't have an exact ETA on that yet, but it should be complete in the next few months. It's part of our engagement with Accenture. Happy to answer any questions or any specific items that you'd like me to break down on this dashboard.
Yeah, Javier, I have a question just before I turn it back to the board. You have on one of your slides, it says service hours. Now we're up to 14,470 service hours per month. This was in January. And I saw every month's been going up. What is the maximum that per the contract would be that we were going to hit?
I'm going to touch on that on the next slide, if you don't mind. I've got some more information on that.
Okay,
to
good,
break down in
good,
general
okay.
of what the service is looking like in that regard. If that's okay.
Any questions on this particular slide?
Javier, can I just ask you, when we look at completed trips by day of week, is there any significance to what looks like it goes up on Tuesday? Interestingly enough, down on Friday, back up on Sunday. Was that just that particular week, or is there some significance to the days?
This is since service launch. I don't know that we've found any correlation to anything specific on those days of the week.
Okay. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Not a problem. No other questions? We can move on to the next slide.
Wait, we have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
done seeing that.
Javier, so I'm noticing that, average pickup time is kind of creeping up a little bit each month. Is that just a reflection of high demand, or do you feel that there are other factors there?
It's 100% accounted for demand and supply issues. So, which again, we'll touch base on a little bit on the next slide here. But as demand is increased, so, and I'll touch on that a little bit more, I guess. The threshold for receiving a seat unavailable error message is, or not error message, but is 30 minutes. So basically anything up to that point, you can see the wait times increase. So, but due to demand, we are seeing the numbers go up.
Okay, no other questions on this particular slide. We'll move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go.
So here's where I'll touch a little bit on what demand is doing to our supply issues and seat unavailable error messages that we're seeing. We can see a large increase in demand. In January, we had a 23% bump, which brought our seat unavailable percentages from mid-single digits all the way up to 10%. To answer Chair Molina's question about the number of hours that are contractually suggested by VIA, truly the service was meant to be delivered with about 11,000 service hours per month based on our contract. If we look at it linear, that number should go up and down over the course of the year, just based on seasonal, such as UNT, holidays. But we've really just seen the numbers go up and up over the course of the past several months. And we are, as the chair noted, we're up to 14,400 hours. Coming in March, we'll be working with VIA, and VIA will actually be presenting an idea of what the service hour model looks like to take us through the end of the fiscal year. We will have to come back with an amendment to the budget to support the service moving forward. If we keep service hours where they are right now, we do assume that seat unavailable percentages will stay at 10%, possibly climb a little more as well.
Chair.
Yes, question.
Javier, do they have an estimate at this point of how many additional vehicles it'll take to make up the gap?
I think more than vehicles, we're probably looking at more service hours than anything else. We have more vehicles on the road than we initially planned on, just due to spares and accidents and vehicles that have been brought back into service. The number of vehicles is well over 40 at this point. I think it's about 41, 42. So I think the vehicle capacity is okay. It's just the amount of service hours required to support the service will increase. I don't have that estimate in front of me right now. That's what VIA will be presenting. I would assume, based on 14,400 hours in January to support the service and 10% unavailable, we're probably looking at a higher number than that. It really just depends on the tolerance for seat unavailable, the tolerance for wait times increasing. If we want to bring that number back down into the single digits, the seat unavailable percentage, it's just going to require more hours to support the service. That being said, efficiency of the service has increased. The service was meant to be delivered with about a 3.8 rides per service hour per service hour, and we are getting close to that number. So efficiency has gone up, but still, again, demand is up, and it's just increasing those numbers.
Good to hear. And to be clear, I want to make sure that we're managing amazing success with this process right now. So how do we continue to make sure that we don't degrade service and provide a solid solution that residents are obviously going after and enjoying?
Agreed. Thank you.
I was just wondering if we are finding any improvement in the shared rides. We talked about the fact that it would be multiple people in the vehicles, and it was beginning. Sorry, my question is: are we seeing any improvement in shared rides where we have multiple people in a vehicle as opposed to individuals?
We are, with the higher efficiency numbers, means a higher correlation of aggregated rides with more with more rides having multiple passengers on board for sure. That's part of the efficiency increase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Raymond,
you.
did have a question or comment?
I do. The average wait time of 20 minutes, there are folks that we're getting more customer inbound concerns about longer wait time. So obviously an average of 20 minutes means that there are some folks that are waiting more than 30 minutes. That's what Javier was saying, that the system will come back and say, seat's not available. Try again to rebook your ride. It is a significant concern because we're seeing demand grow so quickly. If you recall, before launch, we said, wouldn't it be great if we get to a point where success drives the addition of additional hours of service? And I think that's where we're coming to. There is a nuance that I've asked staff to look at, which is in and around the university itself. We've heard some folks say that they've seen Go Zone vehicles dropping off passengers inside campus or near the campus. So we want to make sure that we're working with the university to figure out, to ensure that capacity is not being taken away from the Connect service for its original intent. I know there's meetings that are planned with UNT to make sure that and with VIA to make sure that we're following along those guidelines. But for the most part, it does appear that that it's a significant success. And we will need to address the board in very short order with, and we've asked VIA to come back with some estimates on what it would take to Board Member Gilmore's request on how much additional cost and hours it'll take to satiate that demand and get us back down to the 15 to 20 or less than 20 minute average wait time. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Any other comments from the board? Now we'll move on with the next slide.
Next slide, please. This slide is a direct feedback or a direct request from the board regarding the seat unavailable percentage by member city and by time of day. We can see here that the seat unavailable percentage as expected would go up during commute hours around 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. We see that quite a bit. And then breaking it down by zone, I'm sorry, not member city, you can see blue is represented by Denton, and I'm sorry, Denton is represented by blue, and Highland Village Louisville service is represented by yellow. So the service.
What is, can you tell us what is other?
Other are expansion zones, such as the Dania zone, and then as well as the A train replacement service on Sundays and late hour type service.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem.
This is a lovely graph. Thank you. It really helps to get a visual on what's going on.
Not a problem. I'm glad we could provide that for you. Any other questions? Any questions on this slide?
Anybody else? Okay, Allison.
I'm just curious why Denia is not included with the rest of Denton.
It's not a specific zone. It's called as an expansion zone. I'm not really sure why it wasn't included in that
Because
way.
it wasn't
And
included in the original.
I may be incorrect. It might be looped into the zone, and the red may indicate just that. I'd have to go back and see, just double check that data for you, but I'm not 100%
Okay.
that it's not looped.
Yeah,
in.
I can wait on an
There
answer.
is, when we originally came to the board and presented with the proposed deployment, there was a lot of iterations with the board about design of the zones and areas and what was going to be covered and what was not going to be covered. There was a request by the board and suggested by VIA that we could provide service down to Trinity Mills. The request came in, well, how much will that cost? Denia was another area that we were looking at. So early on, we defined those additional service parameters separately. And we're going to need to come back, staff's going to need to come back to the board to more or less do what you just said, which is to incorporate all of those not to exceed. So we set up a not to exceed value of 175,000 for one and a not to exceed, because there was some interest from the board members to make sure that that additional the value add of adding that service in that particular zone was worth the financial cost of that service. the reality is it's very difficult with even the rich data that we have to really determine origin and destination of those. We really need to come back and just consolidate those as one financial parameter within the contract and incorporate it. But that was the reason they were just split out separate, because they were separate asks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Raymond.
other questions? All right, no other questions on this slide? We'll continue.
Next slide, please. Okay. Next, we have a look ahead based on the outputs of the December 2021 board meeting. The two outputs were a comprehensive operations analysis to be delivered in June of 2022 during that board meeting, as well as modifications to the existing Denton fixed routes, which are set to begin on March 14th. A refresher of the Denton route changes are on the next slide. The goal of the upcoming COA is to work in tandem with Accenture and VIA to provide a multimodal and intermodal solution that combines both GO Zone service and optimizes fixed routes, an effort to better integrate the services to support each other more effectively. Support of the COA by Accenture was included in task order number 3 approved at the January board meeting. A proposal for VIA services to undertake this effort will be presented in item number 3 following this update. Staff and Accenture will be providing monthly updates leading up to the June presentation, as well as work is already underway with major milestones in April, where early modeling should show an approximation of the amount of fixed route that will be needed to provide service in FY23 in tandem with GO Zone service. So I know this slide's a little wordy, so I'm happy to answer any questions about the COA.
Any questions on this, on the comprehensive operations analysis? Yes,
I do, but I don't know. Did you?
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
you go
Allison.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Are we, I'm a little concerned that the promotional fair is going to be moving out to almost a year with this timeline. Is it my understanding that we're not going to be dealing with looking at the fair policy until June?
We're
Is how I'm
working on
reading all of
modeling
this.
that. We're working on modeling that with VIA as we speak. They've already given us some presentations on what their recommendations look like. But staff, to make sure that we're looking at this in a fair equity situation and what we are legally allowed to do and properly allowed to do to serve the public, we will have to push that back until September. That's correct. Once we model all the service changes together.
Because my understanding was in December, the fare and route changes were going to take place in March. So what you're telling me is that we've got federal compliance that's pushing this back?
Making sure we do our due diligence. That's correct.
Fair policy is independent of route changes. We can address fair policy how we desire to do so. The thought was because back in December, we talked about a potential base and mileage-based service approach, that rather than try to set fair policy without VIA's input on what that distance-based model should look like, going out to the public, modifying it, and then turning around 3 months later, doing it again, is going to be very confusing for the general public. But fares can be addressed at any point. So if the board gets comfortable that you want to change the pricing structure for GO Zone, that certainly could have an impact on ridership. We thought it would make a lot of sense for us to take the whole idea of distance-based pricing, have dialogue with the board monthly. The board gets comfortable sooner rather than later to push out a fair price change, then that can certainly be done. It's always wise, and there's federal laws that require us to go out and get feedback and input and the board approve fair policy separate from that. It can be in unison, but it can be done also separately.
I think my biggest concern and why I would like to see the fair policy, decoupled and maybe accelerated is we know that is encouraging versus fixed route from a cost standpoint. So the sooner we can get those to be equitable price alignment, the less likely we are to have an argument in September that one mode versus the other has been subsidized, which I think we are all in agreement that we want clear, good data for the modalities that we have to make sure that we're not influencing one with a tool that we can use. I'm also seeing that we're going to be spending more money regardless. So we probably need to start capturing a bit more of that revenue now versus later to be able to not have as big a hole to dig out of at the end of the year. So, but just my opinions on the timeline. So I'm hopeful that we can maybe accelerate that.
Question, what is the promotional fare? How is that structured?
The promotional fare was a 75-cent fare. So for every ride you take, it's 75 cents. With fixed route, it's $1.50. There's a time base increment also around, there's a lot of different fare structures.
Sure.
But the basis of it was 75 cents for a ride. If you need a return trip, it's also 75 cents.
Okay.
And the thought when the original budget was set is that you could typically with a $1.50 fare, you could on bus, you could probably take a ride out and a ride back in. With a via ride, every ride's 75 cents. So the other thought was we wanted to really see what the demand opportunity was with the service. So holding prices low. In a lot of cases, when you launch new service, transit agencies will do free fares for a period of time. We didn't feel that was appropriate. Most cases with on-demand, it costs more. If you go to Arlington, you go to other places, they charge a premium fare. It's not really considered premium. It's just more expensive. On-demand for access is probably one of the most expensive types of services that we provide. But that was the genesis for setting the price where we did. Our concern with exiting December is we only had 3 months of actual service in the books. Ridership has been growing significantly. We still are going to see likely a downturn in the May timeframe when UNT lets out. But rather than get all the way to September, we want to start having conversations about pricing, getting VIA. VIA has some really good ideas about demand pricing strategies, how that will work within the app. And I know they're excited to start presenting that over the next several months so that the board can decide how it wants to proceed.
He track that by individual, like their first 10 rides could be a promotional fare, could it be on an individual basis, or is it
Yes.
just by time period?
It can be done that way. There's also concepts of fare capping as well. So once you've purchased a certain number of rides,
Then
the rest of your rides for the month are free. That helps take care of some social economic issues. So there's a lot of variability in how it can be defined.
Good, okay.
Yeah, thank you. What I was going to say was very similar to what Vice Chair Gilmore pointed out, that I would also really like to see us move a little bit faster on ending our blanket promotional fare for Go Zone. But of course, I still want to see more comprehensive analysis of fare structure across the system in June, if that's when we can get it. I'd also like to request to staff that included in the options that we see in June be elimination of fares for Connect service and possibly A-Train as well. I'd love for those to be options that are on the table for us to discuss.
Other questions?
So just for those maybe listening, so so Raymond, if I'm going to take the bus, I pay $1.50, and I'm going to take it to my work. Or maybe Javier, I don't know who needs to answer this question. And then from work back, is it another $1.50?
It is on the current 6-route scenario. You have the AM PM pass. The AM pass is $1.50 and covers you for the morning, and then your ride home would be $1.50 for the PM pass. So in this case, a Go Zone ride would be 75 cents to work and 75 cents back. To Raymond's point, it basically just it was kind of built with the idea of the 75 cents to go to, let's say, the grocery store, and then 75 cents back would kind of be the equivalent of that AM PM pass. It definitely comes up differently once you think of it as the commute to work and commute back.
So I don't think 6 months is bad for a promotional with the Go Zone, for instance. So March would make it 6 months that we've actually, rolled out the Go Zone. I think that's fine. So then we can go into let's make them comparable so that we can do a orange to orange and apples to apples. So.
Director, I would like to ask, so we have an agenda item for the next meeting, for us to do a deep dive on all of our advertising and public relations efforts, where we're advertising, how we're communicating with the public. A very deep dive on that, because I'd like to see how we're communicating with all of our cities and our individual members of the public. So we could.
So what I'm hearing is the board is giving direction to staff to go ahead and continue to end the promotional fair at the end of March as was originally. That's what I'm hearing. And if so, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing there's consensus from the board to let's go ahead and end the promotional fair at the end of March and go to what was proposed to be the standard fair in April. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, yeah. My understanding was that we had discussed some options for different fare structures, but we would need to vote on a new fare structure, right?
Not a fair structure, but the promotional fair, because the promotional fair was supposed to, that 75 cents
Replace it with something.
was going to end, supposed to end, I thought at the end of March and revert to $1.50 for Go Zone. So I've been kind of hearing that people saying, yeah, let's go ahead and end the promotional fair. But I want to make sure.
I'm not saying that.
Well, I would like to end the promotional fair, but I think that we need an item at our next meeting to vote on so that we can replace it with something, because we haven't agreed on what to replace it with.
I just wanted to clarify with the board that that's not that changing, that there is no set fare for the promotional fair, and there has been no public engagement in regards to changing. So that's not something that we can really do at the end of March right now.
We set a promotional fair. We said it would run for 6 months. If we do not change the promotional fair, it just becomes the fair until the board decides to make a change. The issue is if the board were to provide direction to staff to end the 75-cent fare, we need ample time to go back out to the public to say what the new fare is going to be. So we did not, I don't know whether it was intentional or unintentional, but at the time we did not recommend what the new fare should be at the end of the 6 months.
So so then let me then restate it. Then I'm hearing that there is a desire to end the promotional fair. So bring back to us at the next meeting something to consider.
We're recommending that the fair stay the fair until there's ample time for VA and staff to present to the board an alternative to that 75-cent fare. And that we would do that sooner rather than later so that we can go out to the public. Once the board resolves what they want to do, we can go back to the public.
And I think public involvement is very important that we do. That's why I'm asking, how have we promoted this? Public involvement, there's ways in which you can satisfy criteria outlined by the feds or our other partners. And there's other going above and beyond. I want to make sure that the agency is going above and beyond on our public involvement. And I'm open to a promotional fair that's based on the individual. If someone wakes up a few months from now, decides to avail themselves of that, maybe that's something that we're promoting per user, as they start utilizing the system instead of just being wholesale across the board. If we can break it down by the individual. So I think that's a way we need to
we have
explore.
several initiatives going on right now. We're trying to update our Title VI program. We need to make sure that we're getting public engagement and what we're going to recommend as far as fair pricing is concerned. We want to make sure that we're doing public outreach. So as part of the recommendations, we're getting input from the general public about what's affordable, what's not affordable. And then we're also providing the board with information about what others are doing with regard to on-demand, so that informed decisions can be made around what the appropriate level of pricing should be. And I'll just reiterate that our concern was initially was to not impact the demand for the service, because it's new and it was so comprehensive in nature. We've had basically 3 months of ridership at the time that would have dictated that we come back to the board and say, oh, we need to make a pricing change. We just didn't feel, based on the update that VIA provided at the December meeting, that there was a desire even from VIA at that point to recommend either keeping it or going to a different fair concept. So we feel compelled to bring that information back to the board over the next several months as we discuss what service will look like next year, but we can decouple the pricing from the actual service.
So comment and a question. When we took action in December, the fare policy and the route changes were all going to take place in March. That's my understanding.
There was no fair policy from my recollection. There was not a recommendation to change it to something new.
Okay.
Pricing.
And-
It was just a change in the service.
Okay. And I keep hearing the phrase adequate time. How long?
roughly 60 days is typically when you go out and do public outreach. They usually run 60 to 90 days. It's not required that you do that. It's usually 30, I believe it's 30 days that's required by the federal government.
Okay, so are we talking about the May or the June board meeting?
When we would set policy,
When we bring this all back to us to have a conversation and get a pricing structure in?
the idea was that we incorporate the pricing and the fair discussion, finalize that by the end of the June board meeting.
And then
Pricing
implement it
can
in
change.
September?
And implement in September, because it's not only, there's physical parameters on the actual service itself, stops, facilities, things of that nature that need to go get taken down, bagged, whatever we're going to do with fixed route service.
That's on the Connect side.
That's on the Connect side.
On the Go Zone rate structure, we don't have to wait for that, though.
But there's still analysis that needs to be done to get to that pricing structure as well.
I would love to see a pricing conversation on Go Zone by May.
I think we need to have it for the next few meetings. We can continue the dialogue. And I think we need to have a standing item on the agenda about our public outreach. What are we accomplishing in our public outreach? I think it needs to be a standard agenda item that we're looking at. And as we work to tweak that, I think communication is important in what we do. And I think we need to have monthly reports that we go over, presentations from the staff, and that we are continually in a mindset of process improvement on that.
I agree with board member, just seconding that. I would also like that to be a standing item.
And that's the intent, that VIA will start presenting, DCTA will be presenting this whole process, starting with the March. The actual,
Okay.
with March.
I'm thinking comprehensively, where are we spending our advertising dollars? How are we doing outreach? What public hearings have we had? What public hearings are on the horizon? All of that and I'd like for us to do that. And I'd like to see a draft of that the staff is going to present to the board. I'd like to see a draft of that early, sent out to the board in case we need to modify that and have them go back before the next board meeting. So we have that. So it's not just in the agenda packet, but that it's in advance. So we could say, no, go back and look at this, or we can start tweaking that.
Okay. So kind of summarize, I'm here, we want to continue the discussion on the Go Zone price structure. I'm hearing also that we want to have a discussion on outreach marketing efforts. Does the staff have adequate direction on this side?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Javier, is there anything else?
Not on this particular slide, so we can move on to the next one unless there's any other questions on the COA process. So,
Any questions on the comprehensive operation analysis process?
and I apologize, I really can't see the entire board view with the current view that I have right now. So
I don't see any more questions on this item.
if all is well, next
On the COA.
Next slide, please.
Okay, sir. Okay.
This is just a brief touch point on what was decided upon on the December board meeting. You can see the combination of blue and gray is the existing current fixed route service in Denton. Blue only represents what we'll be presenting or what we'll be implementing on March 14th. So you can kind of see where the outer edges are trimmed off and just the new route profile that will be implemented.
Questions on this slide?
Okay. Brief overview on communication strategies for the March service changes. Marketing collateral, including new and updated route guides, vehicle and facility signage. There's been digital marketing performed, website pop-up indicating to users of our website the information, social media, email marketing, billboards, advertorials and or blogs, and then specific news releases and targeted media outreach, UNT, Chamber of Commerce, local partners, and business customer service. Next slide, please. This is just a brief overview of some of the bus stop signage, similar to signage that we had in December. Just an indication of those are the bags that were discussed earlier, bagging signs for updates and closed signs.
Javier, can you do me a favor on this one?
Sure can.
Could you pull up where that QR code takes us?
That QR code should go straight to our primary website, right, dcta.net.
Okay, can you pull that up?
I can share my screen. Hold on one second.
But that QR code actually goes to a service changes page. It's a universal code that we use for all of our service changes. So our inclement weather information was posted on this site. So it's one that we're always keeping up to date with the latest information regarding any route or service changes.
Gotcha. And can you pull that page up?
Pamela, do you want to share your screen and show that direct link?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Thank you.
I'm not allowed to share my screen. It's disabled.
It takes you to the planet trip.
Go ahead, Pamela.
I should put a link in the chat.
Pamela, you can show your screen if you'd like. You should be able to, if you have authorization to do so. There we go.
All right, so this talks about service schedule changes, service impacts. Can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah, does that look like the same page that you have on your phone?
That's not what I pulled up when I scanned.
Yeah, so that's not the same.
So that's not the page that comes up when I scanned the QR code. It takes me to the plan a trip page, and then there's quick links. And under recent news, there is a link where you can click on to get the schedule changes.
Okay, that is incorrect, and we will fix that.
So the one it took me to And quite frankly, I am 6 feet tall and I have a pretty modern smartphone. I was able to get the QR code off of one of them here in Louisville, the one up by the new courthouse. My phone couldn't read the QR code. There's no phone number. When I go to that page, it lets me put in where I'd like to go to plan a trip, where I'd like to go. And so I was here in Louisville. And I said, well, you know what, I'll use the engine. And I typed City Hall as where I'd like to go. And I actually was right next to Civic Circle. So I just put in Civic Circle. And it gave me a really great layout from Google and told me to use Lyft. Nothing on the page says Go Zone. Nothing links to how to add the Go Zone app, and nothing gives me the phone number to be able to book a ride with Go Zone. Can I ask who thought this was acceptable? There's a reason that there is an undercurrent in this community, that there's a bunch of people who sit here in a boardroom and make decisions that impact people's lives and are not paying attention. This is a massive misstep. I think my point's been made.
Can we go back to the imagery that's on the signs? The slide that had the
Go
sign,
back to slide 22.
who was driving it?
Yeah, there's a phone number at the bottom. But it's up very high and it is small.
Yeah, it's 2 different signs. It's not on.
Closed,
Yeah.
one for.
Could we even add an additional sign? Because the one on the left in the orange mentions Go Zone. And the one on the right does not. I mean, could we add an additional sign? Signs are cheap. Could we add an additional sign, have some salesmanship that says this area is now served by Go Zone. We encourage you to use Go Zone
And Judge, yeah,
I
it
mean,
does say Go Zone, but when you hit the website, there's no mention of Go Zone on the website using the QR code or the link.
The one on the right doesn't say
The
Go
one on the
Zone,
left.
The 2
The
QR
one on the
codes are
left does.
different.
but the one on the right does not.
Do you notice that? The 2 QR codes.
Are they different?
Yeah.
That's the only one I've been able to scan is the orange one. I haven't seen one with the white.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
they are different.
That not accept. And it should, I mean, if it should take you to the Go Zone app, or here's how to get into Go Zone with your Play Store. I mean,
Okay,
it's
we will-
it's
we
I
will
mean, it's
make
really
it-
simple. This does nothing to help people when they're out in the street.
Well, if we need to add another sign, we add another sign.
Pamela, were you going to say something?
Yes, so I was going to clarify a bit of the difference between the decals and the bags. The decals are a stopgap measure that we can put up in advance prior to the stops actually going away, which is why we have the code that is going to the service updates page. That people are aware of what's going on. The bus stop closed is a different message. And because of procurement and things like that, we kept it very generic so that they can be used on any bus stop anytime we make changes. So they're intended to be reused for more than one purpose.
And for full disclosure, I did not stop at a bagged one. The only ones I saw were the ones at Civic Circle here in Louisville and the one at the corner by the new courthouse in Denton. And those were both the orange stickers.
But that orange sticker on that particular item did not have a bag because it wasn't intended to go away.
In this
What was the
instance,
bag?
the
was not bad.
decals were used as a stopgap. So the decals could go up in advance of the stops being removed. And so they happen prior to the bags actually going on. They're easier to procure. They're easier to get up in a quick time manner. They're also used in instances where the signage has more than one bus stop on it, like for the examples in Denton where we were closing certain routes, but that didn't mean that the bus stop itself was being closed. So the decals were used in those situations as well. The bus stop bags are actually put on after the bus stop is closed.
So as of Thursday this week, the one at Civic Circle was still the orange sticker. As of Saturday this week, the one in Denton was still the orange sticker at the courthouse, the new courthouse.
Okay, we will make note and go back to our contractor and verify that all the work was completed.
Any other questions, comments?
I think we need to have something that says, here's the go zone number, at least in the Highland Village, Louisville area. Here's the go zone number, here's the go zone link. So people who are standing out there can either fire up the app or they can call and get a ride right now. And I don't think the QR code, it's 6.5 feet in the air or 7 feet in the air. I don't think that's really helpful to folks who maybe have mobility issues either. I don't think that would comply with ADA issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think that concludes this item. So that was a discussion item. So move on now to item 3, an action item, discuss and consider authorizing the CEO to negotiate and enter into an agreement with River North Transit LLC via for comprehensive operational analysis services. Javier.
Sorry, 2022, and I'm still dealing with mute issues. In this item, staff is requesting the board consider authorizing the CEO to negotiate and enter into an agreement with VIA for COA support services. Next slide, please. To work alongside staff and Accenture in support of the COA analysis, VIA has presented DCTA proposal with the following items identified in the scope of work as outlined in Exhibit 1. These items here are just a breakdown of the individual items that are in the proposed task order, defining technology options and timeline. By that, we mean the development of a multimodal intermodal app solution, which mixes both fixed route and go zone service into one app with different proposals. Multimodal being the option to, in a sense, choose your own adventure between go zone or a fixed route ride or an on-demand ride. Or a mixed mode or intermodal solution of, say, take a go zone vehicle to a fixed route hub or stop to complete your ride, as well as a train and everything else that any other service that DCTA offers. Existing conditions analysis is just a breakdown of our current modes, current fixed route, what we have in place with go zone, develop and assess service alternatives. This is in regards to what we discussed earlier, reviewing our fixed routes, what they look like, where go zone complements them, and then followed up by refining those alternatives, cost benefit analysis, that also includes some of the pricing analysis that we've discussed already. And then, of course, developing initial and final recommendations to the board, and then implementation in FY23. The proposed cost for these services over the course of the next 5 months in tandem with Accenture's work and staff's work is $75,000.
Thank you, Javier. Questions? Comments?
Question.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, is that, or whoever, maybe Javier, can you explain if this contract is a standalone contract with VIA or is it an addition to their existing contracts we have with VIA?
This one will not be an amendment to the existing task order we have with them. It'll be a standalone task order issued to them.
Task order.
Okay.
Out there. We have a master contract and then we do specific task orders against the contract. I'm not sure if that's answering the question that you have.
It does. So it is somewhat attached to the original contract in a way.
Attached.
So this wasn't bid out or anything like that for this service, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
That particular service, like an additional addition to the scope of services under their master agreement.
And it doesn't include these things in their master agreement.
To do a comprehensive COA, it does not.
Does not.
The reason we chose VIA to do this is because there's so much integration between all the data that's being generated from VIA map. So because I think there's different folks that were here prior to or now than when we originally let the contract. But the reason we chose VIA to do this is because we've been having a lot of discussion about how much fixed route service, how are those decisions made with regard to fixed route service. We thought because VIA and the amount of service that they're providing has created such a rich data stream that we'd be able to use that to really determine how much or little we need of fixed route service, how that'll improve overall the integration of both. And so leveraging them, and they also purchased a company by the name of Remix, who we use to do all of our route planning internally. So it's all under the VIA umbrella. We felt like that was probably the best way to address this. We also have an independent kind of owners representative with Accenture, separate contract, that's also partnered on this to make sure that we're looking at the amount of fixed route that's going to be necessary come June in comparison to what we really need with VIA. So we felt like the best way to approach this was to execute an additional task order with VIA to provide that service to us.
Let me add a little bit. I think that this contract, and I'm going to ask our legal counsel to make sure I'm saying this correctly. This is really a professional services contract with VIA, or is this?
This actually would be covered under, it's not, it's exempt from competitive, does not require competitive bidding. So.
Thank you.
That's
exactly where I wanted to, because I think.
Yeah, doesn't require competitive bidding.
I think Mr. Gonzalez brought up the fact that it was this bid. It's not something that's by law has to be bid. It falls an exception. Okay. So staff can make a professional recommendation based on.
Yeah, but they still have to bring us back to the board depending on what that cost is gonna be.
Certainly they do, but it's two different ways of actually procuring the service.
And this is being brought back to the board for consideration.
Okay, so this is an action item. We are
Yes.
to
We discussed in our last board meeting as well.
so.
How much of this is dealing with the app and app integration? Any of it?
As far as a percentage of it, or?
No, just any of this conversation that we're talking about approving today, dealing with an app, with the mobility app?
Ultimately, within the Go Zone app, yes. I mean, it's developing and building an app, redeveloping the Go Zone app to allow the multimodal and intermodal trips.
So my recollection as part of VIA's proposal to us was that they were already part of DART's app. And we already buy A-train tickets can be purchased through DART's app. Is there a reason it feels like recreating the wheel?
There is currently no integration with VIA services within the DART Go Pass app. It's in development with Trinity Metro, but it's still not completed. So integration is part of the contract, but we're
Trinity,
not
not DART.
Let me try to provide some clarity. It's confusing. Go Pass is being used by all three transit agencies.
Correct.
The level of integration with VIA had not been done previously. There is a level of integration that Trinity Metro is doing because they're using VIA to integrate some functionality within the Go Pass app. That is not what we're talking about doing currently with DCTA. We wouldn't do that until after that has been integrated into the Go Pass app. And that's to allow the business rules that Trinity Metro has set out with their community to allow people to purchase and have the transactions go through and clear between Trinity Metro and GoPass. What we're talking about is what are we doing with VIA? And how do we set up the pricing structure? And what level of configuration? There's no new programming that's being done. It's my understanding from VIA. We've had several conversations with them. This is about configuring it based on how the pricing would work for DCTA within the VIA app itself. If there's desire thereafter, based on that functionality, to integrate any of that into the GoPass, that is a different conversation that we would have with DART.
And I think if I'm better understanding the question, the bulk of this contract is more about data analysis and design of the service model moving forward, not a bulk of the time being spent on the app. I think that maybe more clarifies the question as far as where the cost
It
lies.
sounds very confusing because there's folks that have been part of that history and folks that haven't. In December, the board made a decision based on our recommendations with VIA as a stopgap measure to make modifications to constrict the amount of service because we didn't have enough operators and there was some service inefficiency on the street that we set up two things to do. One is to do a comprehensive change to the entire fixed route system that we would use the data from GoZone to inform. That's what's being presented in June. Before we get to June, back in December, we decided that we were going to reduce the amount of fixed route service as a stopgap measure so that we could right size the amount of service and right size to the number of employees that we had. DCTA does 3 service changes annually every year. We do a spring, we do a fall, and we do a summer schedule because we're so heavily impacted by how many people are actually using the service. So that's why you're seeing a March deployment, why we'll do another deployment for the May, June timeframe in support of what's happening with UNT. And we do a September/October deployment. And that's consistent with all transit agencies. They typically do 2 major service changes a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. We're a little bit different because we have the university, so we do a summer markup and change. So what you're hearing today is that we're bringing back in June recommendations for what the new service will look like based on all the demand and all the trips and everything that have been delivered by VIA. And we're asking VIA to make recommendations based on the modeling where fixed routes, whatever level of fixed route service they're recommending, and how that would integrate with this on-demand model. And to your point, TJ, the software and how we would use hubs and pricing, if you recall from the board meeting in December, that was what we were intending to do with VIA. I can get through that.
Any other questions from the board? Remind everyone, yes.
Oh, I was just going to move approval of the items.
Remind everyone, this is an action item.
Can I wait? Can I ask my question then?
Yes.
So I appreciate it.
I'll hold off.
I want to be clear on my expectation on the COA, and that's to determine cost effectively serving our passengers. I want to make sure we're not predisposing the outcome in any particular way, which goes back to my pricing models. I'm hopeful that we can see some sort of cost benefit analysis in June that shows us that cost effectiveness. And so we can make data-driven decisions. And I get that we're going to be in some transitional period, but that's my goal that I want to see out of the COA, is that we're getting good data about what it's costing to move people. And then we can make judgment calls on what we want to subsidize and what we don't want to subsidize and work through that. But that's what I'm hoping is the objective of this, is to bring us back that kind of information. Is that the expectation that VIA and staff have, or is there something different?
No, that's exactly right. It's on point. We have Accenture that's put together a very detailed, to your earlier request for what do we do with public outreach? When are we making decisions around what the model is going to look like? What level of fixed route service will be fed by on demand, what the pricing associated with those models will look like. and then how we price, what our pricing schema would be for the general public. All that's part of this comprehensive review. And rather than get an independent third party, because there's consultants out there that do this sort of thing, but rather than get somebody, another consultancy in to make those recommendations, independent of VIA and Accenture seem to be kind of off the mark. So we figure we should probably use the experts that we have on hand and that have been part of this.
So do we anticipate this is, that's a good point, Raymond, and do we think this is something we would do annually with them? Or is this, as we're just trying to get everything up and fully functioning?
Service changes are constantly with that. With regard to Accenture, as far as public outreach and things of that nature, we have other contracts that are in place where we would go out and do public outreach, but because the way people are traveling is changing so dynamically, we're seeing ourselves this significant interest in mobility, which is fantastic. I mean, we've reached pre-pandemic levels in so many areas. It warrants continuous assessment, but that's why most all transit authorities have this iterative process with making changes. Pricing's typically looked at about every 2 years. Services looked at every spring and fall, depending on what we're seeing happening in the overall system. So it would be iterative annual.
Does that answer your comments?
Thank you.
Allison, we were going to make a motion. Still want to make a motion?
Oh, and yes, before I make my motion, I just want to reiterate that it's important to me that among the options that we see analysis of, it includes elimination of fares on fixed routes. I move approval of the item.
Yeah, motion to approve. Is there a
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Gilmore. Any further discussion? None? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
All right. Next item, consider approval of resolution 322-02, approving budget revisions 2022-07. Amanda Riddle. And before
Good
Amanda
morning,
gets
everyone.
going, good morning, Amanda. Before you get started, Amanda, what I'd like to do is item 4 and item 6 are so related. I just want to put Javier on notice. I want to go to item 6 right after we finish doing item 4. So.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Amanda.
Next slide, please. We have, on this budget revision, we have 2 components. The first one is the VA customer service. The overall increase is $242,200. This task order was presented to the board in January, and as mentioned, it is on item 6 of this agenda packet to be approved. It covers March through September, and that is via running the customer or including customer service from March through September. The second portion is related to the joint rail operations facility. This came to the board in January as well. And this covers the design phase of the joint rail operations facility expansion with DART. There is no bottom line impact of this project since DART will be paying for the design portion in its entirety. And so that is $1,027,200. And that is it. On pages 135 and through 145 of your packet, you can find the resolution along with the budget revision. We've included a change in net position schedule on page 142, which shows DCTA only. And on 143, it shows DCTA and NTMC as well combined. If there are any questions, I can try to answer, or someone will.
Amanda, I want to just start with one brief question. Joint rail operations facilities, looks like we've already executed a task order with Jacobs Engineering. And why was Jacobs used? Is that because they're the same firm that Dart was using and it just made a whole lot of sense?
I think
Or are they
Paul
currently-
could include more
Yes.
information on this.
Yes, I can answer that, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Paul.
Jacobs Engineering was selected as the design consultant because we had them under contract as an on-call engineering and architectural services firm. And for the sake of time, in order to meet the deadlines and milestones laid out in the ILA, they were well positioned to provide the work. And so that's why we gave them the task order.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Questions from the board on item number 4? This is a action item. Motion by Director Lewis. Item 4, second by Vice Chair Gilmore. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Item carries. Let's move on to item 6 then. Since this is a companion item. This is consider approval of amendment to task order with River North Transit via regarding Go Zone customer support services. Javier.
Thank you, Chair. As presented in last month's board meeting, VIA currently provides customer service support for Go Zone under an agreement which ends in March. That support service includes email, phone, basically any type of service directly related to Go Zone service. Next slide, please.
Okay.
We presented a version of this slide last month. This has been slightly updated, just showing the number of calls that VIA has taken in regards to Go Zone service, the average wait time for a call, as well as some of the major categories of calls that they take in. Along with that are the total support costs of $245,000 to take us through the end of the fiscal year. There is a small credit in place there for some of the existing services that we have with them, taking us an incremental cost to DCTA of $242,200 and $242,200, as outlined by Amanda in the previous item.
Okay, board, we just approved the budget, so we have $242,000 available to us. Is there any discussion on this item? Or motion?
I move approval.
We have a motion for approval by Director McGuire, second by Director Costas. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Okay, that is our last action item, I believe, and now no, there's one more. Okay. We'll go back to item number 5, review and discuss project management office PMO activities with Accenture. Chris Newport. Chris, are you here?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
We can go to the next slide. And the next, thank you very much. We have discussed at length this morning, members of the board, the content under bullets, the second and fourth bullet. I'll just touch on those exceptionally briefly. With respect to the board staff strategic planning workshop, bullet number 1, the board expressed a desire to revisit scheduling of that at its regularly scheduled March meeting. So we'll be prepared to pick that work stream meeting up based on the outcomes of that discussion whenever they do happen. With respect to service analysis and reporting, as Raymond mentioned and Javier mentioned, the integrated work plan for the service and fare analysis, including reporting and dashboards. The work is on schedule, and as Javier mentioned, we'll be ready to expose the initial plan for quick dashboards includes that we'll expose the Go Zone dashboard, and that is on schedule, and then be workshopping selection of several other views of dashboards as we go through the task order through June. With respect to service and fare design, that work as well is on schedule, and the schedule includes as Raymond mentioned, the integrated work for the fair equity analysis and the public involvement process. So based on the feedback, we'll be working with the staff partners to support a number of the requests that have been made today. And unless there are any questions on those three, I thought I'd just mention a few high points of where the work is with respect to the ERP alternative selection work stream before I conclude.
Let me ask if there's any questions from the board.
Chris, just a quick one. Do we have an ETA on when the board will be able to start seeing the dashboard?
The GoZone dashboard, sir?
Yes, please.
The plan has that we have that in place on dcta.net at the beginning of April.
Super. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And Mayor Gilmore, I'd say, and each member of the board, if there are specific measures or visualizations that you have in mind that you'd like to see reflected as part of that, obviously channeling that through staff, we can incorporate that as we go. Okay, then with respect to ERP, so we have conducted several product overview demonstrations from several different product vendors and have identified that among the options that have been reviewed so far, that several viable candidates exist as alternatives to the current state and the current product that's being utilized by the vendor. We have an evaluation committee as well as an evaluation steering committee that's in place. The next steps on the work plan include developing an additional set of detailed prompts that the vendors would use for a set of deep dive product scenarios that would be tailored to DCTA's context, and that the evaluation committee and the steering committee, as well as the product vendors, would have an extended period of time to walk through those scenarios, as well as to ask questions and see other product features demonstrated in real time. So we are working with staff to pull together that list of scenarios, and then we'll share that with the vendors to allow them appropriate amount of time to prepare for that deeper dive, more detailed set of demonstrations that will occur. We are, besides preparing for that, where we are paying particular focus right now is designing for and capturing the risks that would be associated with the implementation that can materialize either in issues that impact the ultimate cost that the agency has to pay for implementation or downstream support, as well as the schedule for an implementation. And typically there's three key risk areas with an ERP implementation, and this is where we're focusing our energy with the team to design mitigation strategies around. The first is leadership and team availability. As you are familiar with from your own expertise and from your familiarity with the agency, that the ERP, any ERP touches a number of different business processes, most of them not just relegated to the finance and accounting function. And with many agencies, and certainly at DCTA, there are a lot of processes that are currently conducted on a manual basis that would be moved to a more efficient automated process in the future through adoption and implementation of the ERP system. In order to do that, availability of staff during the different phases of implementation is a critical success factor to how completely the new processes are designed and ultimately how they're adopted and utilized go forward. So staff availability is a critical path to ultimate success. Two closely related items would be data integration, migration, and data quality mitigation exercises, as well as change management and then training of the staff, which, going back to the first item, is closely related to the availability of the team that will ultimately be using the tool. So time spent now, in our view, planning for these risks and designing mitigation strategies can save once we actually get to implementation downstream in a couple of months. That would conclude my report. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Or just given if Marissa or Javier would like to offer or build on anything that I offered, to give them the chance to do so too.
I'm good, Chris. Thank you.
Comments from anybody else? Marissa, Javier? Seeing none, comments, questions from the board? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Let's see, that's number 5. On to item number 7, present and discussion of approach to enhance value of A train. Paul, Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason for this agenda item is in response to inquiry from the board at the end of our January meeting about how to take a next step forward in enhancing the value of our A train. And when we talk about value enhancement generally, we're talking about how do we think about increasing ridership and making the A train more integral into the fabric of our community amongst our member cities and then in the broader region. So this is really intended to be a conversation. I'll stop often and ask for feedback, perspectives. What we've tried to do is take what we've heard from the board and turn this into a plan that could move us forward. And with that sort of feedback from this discussion, we could bring back a budget item and a task order at a later date to get this work started. So if that makes sense, we can get started. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So what we've heard is that our board is considering 3 different objectives to enhance value of the A train, which I defined just a minute ago. Number 1 is improving our A train schedule and frequency for regional connectivity. We've talked about that specifically in terms of syncing up more closely with the Green Line schedule at 20-minute headways. But we also know that as the Silver Line comes on into service in 2024, there's another opportunity as well to enhance our regional connectivity. The second is related to that, the consideration of this extension of service to the new station at Carrollton and the requirements in order to do that really around track structure, signaling systems, PTC, integration with Silver Line operations and short line freight operations, those sorts of things. And then the last item, which we heard a presentation on in the January meeting, was the consideration of a new station at Corinth. So every one of these, if you can go to the next slide, every one of these objectives requires capital projects and other resources in order to implement. And so what I'd like to go through is just a quick overview of what we know already and what we need to know about the requirements to achieve each of these objectives. Before I jump into that, I want to pause though and see if there's any other objectives that the board has in their mind as we think about value enhancement for the A train, or if those 3 that I laid out covered it.
Board, do we have any thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, so I recognize that, the agency has only limited, leverage in this area. But transit-oriented development and parking are big concerns around the downtown Denton Transit Center, in my opinion.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
I'm sorry, Allison, could you repeat that? I want to make sure.
Oh, yeah. The downtown Denton Transit Center, I think that there's a lot of unutilized value and a lot of potential for increasing ridership that originates from that stop. And I think that more transit-oriented development in that area and more parking nearby the downtown Denton Transit area center is going to be crucial to increasing ridership there.
So I see the parking kind of is our DCTA, but would the economic development or transit-oriented development be more from the city?
Yes, yeah, and that's why I prefaced it with, I recognize not all of this is the agency's responsibility, but yeah.
Yeah, trust me, because I'm trying to do that too. And not
Paul, just a couple of things to maybe it's framing in your presentation. We did an optimization study with LTK a few years ago, correct?
Yes, sir, and I'll be speaking to that.
Okay. I know that there was some low-hanging fruit that I think they presented I'm just wondering, is this really is a year necessary based on the plans that have already been done and reviewed?
It's a good question, and that's what I'd like to address through this presentation is understanding what evaluations have been completed to date, and then the process by which we can make the right decisions to determine which investments are the best ones to make to move all of our objectives forward.
Then tally ho. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So in the first objective, improving our schedule and frequency for regional connectivity, the cartoon diagram there at the top of the slide is really in dark blue our A train route from DDTC down to Trinity Mills, and then you see in light green a nominal representation of the green line. Right now, our A train operates in the weekdays on a 30-minute headway. That means a train hits a station every 30 minutes. And on the weekends at 1 hour headways, a train hits the station every hour. On the green line, however, in the off-peak periods, meaning not the rush hour, the green line's at 20-minute headways, and even better, even more frequent in between those in the rush hour times. On the weekends, they're at a standard 20-minute headway. And so just like the vice chairman said, we have completed some evaluations already with our consultant partners at LTK around how to eliminate speed restrictions due to curvature, what sort of opportunities exist to enhance speeds by improving our positive train control system, and how additional sidings and double track could also increase speeds. And then on the right-hand side in the lower part of the slide, we also have some resources on hand. Number one, a $4 million grant from the FRA with $1 million of local money to enhance our PTC system, really in response to that LTK study that was done a couple of years ago. But then we applied in this past round in 2022 for upgrading the PTC system to a different type of PTC system that would be compatible with the DART PTC system that moves from that is going to be on the Silver Line. PTC, positive train control. Positive train control is a safety overlay mandated by the federal government to ensure that passenger trains and freight trains do not exceed their given authority to move over a specific geographical line segment, point A to point B, and also within a specific speed limit. The point of your question, Mr. Vice Chairman, is that there are so many different moving pieces on this railroad, especially because of our great new partnership recognized in the ILA and with the JROF development, that we really need to bring all of these previous evaluations under one umbrella in order to understand the puts and takes of all the different components of a potential capital program. For instance, the 2018 CRISI grant was for one type of PTC system that already exists on our railroad. But if we know that in the future we want to get down to Carrollton and we want to have DART's operation integrated with ours, then it wouldn't make sense to do that PTC system. We would have to do the other type of PTC system, which we applied the grant for. And so the purpose of taking this sort of a step is to make sure that we don't do any work that gets installed and it has to be pulled out at a later date, and also to lay these improvements in along the timeline of all the other major milestones that are happening in the region. So next slide, please. So then this next slide shows the second major objective is the consideration of A-train service extension to a new station at downtown Carrollton. Here we have some work already done in an engineering assessment that LTK did a couple of years ago that looked at a very high level about the type of upgrades that are required and some very preliminary views about where the station could go. We have a site plan of where a train station in Carrollton could be, in literally the polygon, the rectangle on the aerial map. We also, though, need to do this evaluation of the PTC system trade-offs and the benefits of one system versus the other and the relative costs of one system versus the other to make sure that the Silver Line and A-train PTC systems can be in alignment. And then the last part is if we're going to go from Trinity Mills to Carrollton, that segment of railroad is going to have 3 different operators on it. It's going to have an A-train operation, a Silver Line operation, and the DG&O is a short line freight operation that moves limited service through the course of the week. And so we need to be able to make a timetable and an integrated operating plan so those three railroads can work together. In terms of enabling projects and resources that are available for this objective, DART is already going to upgrade the track between Trinity Mills and Carrollton from what it is today to what's considered FRA Class 2, that's a minimum requirement for their Silver Line equipment to operate over to maintain their warranty. But then the NCT COG has also said that if this board were interested in moving passengers and revenue service down to Carrollton, that it would pay to upgrade the track structure further so that we could operate at our passenger speed to get down to Carrollton. Now, here's another good example of of integrating these two different approaches, because we would not want to see DART make an investment to upgrade track speeds to their minimum requirement for warranty, and then us have to come back later and do additional upgrades and potential rework to go faster. And so another reason for these things to come together. Then the 2018 and Chrissy grant is still on the table and could be beneficial here. And then if we get a word on our 2022 Chrissy grant, then that's another potential resource as well. So again, you can begin to see all the different moving pieces related to each one of these objectives. So let's go to the last slide, please. So in this one, again, back to our conversation in January, if we were to decide to add a new station at Corinth, there's a number of evaluations that have already been done around eliminating speed restrictions due to curvature, PTC enhancements, and the rail sidings and double track. If this was a standalone objective, enabling projects and resources, again, the PTC money could be available to us, or would be available to us, and would be helpful. But then we would also expect that the city of Corinth would be making some sort of contribution, at least to be able to offset the impact that they have on our operation. And what I believe, and what our team believes as a result of a study like this, is that we're going to see that enabling projects for each one of these objectives also enables the other objectives to move forward. And so we want to identify, again, which of those are the highest value across all three objectives. So I'll pause there and ask for feedback if there's any questions. Recognize that we're about halfway through the discussion.
So far, let me start by, you've talked to Michael Morris, and Michael Morris says he would be supportive of taking this to the full RTC to provide funding. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it's fair to say we've heard from Michael Morris that he's interested in supporting getting the A train to Carrollton, but it's on us to put the plan together and bring the opportunity to light and to detail.
Did I also hear that Michael Morris is interested in supporting the city of Corinth building or helping to fund a station there?
I have not heard that. And to be fair, I've not asked the question.
Okay, I just
Yes,
wanted
let me interject. The agency has not had formal conversations with Michael Morris asking for a position on any of these things. We've heard DART has had a conversation with Michael Morris about the track 2 to track 4 upgrade. It's not getting it all the way to class 4 where we can operate service. When DART goes in to make the modifications they need to, there are specifics about track spacing and how the configuration of how they do the construction. If it's done once, there's some savings for the agency. It's my understanding the conversation that DART had was that he was supportive of potentially investing in that track upgrade, but there's been no formal discussions. I've certainly not have sat down with Michael on any of these issues.
Okay, I'm just commenting right now that if the region or one of a potential city is going to go to COG asking for support, and we're going to go to COG asking for, we may go to COG asking for support for another portion of the train, of the A train, that should be a coordinated thing. So we don't
Yes.
We don't ask twice.
Right.
So that's,
Correct.
that's all I'm saying.
And I think that's what Paul's trying to do with this study is to make sure we understand each one of these different permutations and what options are there so that we can go back in partnership with DART and make a regional request.
A regional request, yes, okay.
That's correct. One integrated vision, one conversation. Thanks for the.
Perfect, that's great.
Yeah. Question, just to make sure that I understand the scope of what we're talking about. Would upgrading track structure to class 2 or class 4, would any of that require new vehicles? Or would our current vehicles still be compatible with those tracks?
Our current vehicles would be compatible.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you for that.
Other discussions, anybody else? Vice Chair Gilmore?
So I'm trying to compress the timeline, Paul. So let me see if I can't make another angle here. If LTK has already had and gone through this whole process, is there a reason we need to go to procurement and instead let's have LTK come back and just refine what they've already given us?
We're working with LTK right now on a scope of services under our existing contract that would integrate all of the work they've done in the past into this cohesive study that enables us to make one vision, one approach with our regional partners.
Okay, so the goal is to do this with LTK.
That's the conversation that we're having right now.
Okay, I'm just, if they've already been there, they've already turned over all the rocks.
It goes back to how do we ensure competitiveness? How do we put RFPs, new scope of work out on the street and balance that with how do we take advantage of what we've already accomplished? We have an existing contract with LAN. LTK is a sub on that contract.
Mhm.
LAN's had a lot of experience on our railroad. New scope of work. Do we compete it? Do we use existing contractors? That's what Paul's trying to work through.
I feel like there's some low-hanging fruit that we could get into this year's budget and show some progress on this. I think to get more people to use the train, it's got to move faster. It's got to link up with DART better.
Yes.
So,
yep, that's our intent.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Okay, next slide, please. So overall, here's our approach. We want to make sure that we're synced up with the board on identifying our objectives. We want to evaluate each one of those individual objective scenarios. And then we want to figure out what are the capital projects that provide benefit to every one of those capital or to the most of each one of those objectives so that we can identify the value of a particular project both to DCTA and to potential partners in the region, so that then we can go and have the regional conversation, have the federal conversation for discretionary grant funding and execute the program. So if you go to the next slide, this is what this study will turn into. It's a cost funding matrix identifying each of the enabling projects there on the left-hand side of the slide. And this is just a representation, nothing specific, but what we might expect to see. Each of the enabling projects down the left-hand side of the slide, we'll understand programmatically what the cost of those projects are. We'll understand their relative value across all of the objectives that we're trying to achieve. And then we can identify who contributes to that based on the benefits that they receive. The definition of a partnership in this project is going to be each member or each party pays commensurate with the benefits that they realize as a result of that enabling project, and that every enabling project provides a standalone benefit and also a step towards the broader objective that we said we wanted to accomplish. Where we have gaps in those funding contributions locally, then we bring our story to the US DOT and the FRA and the FTA to compete for discretionary grant dollars and other opportunities that might be available at the federal level with the infrastructure money that's in play right now. This is the type of story that we need to be able to tell in order to do the big things that we want to do as an agency and as a region. Does that make sense?
I think there's a I think there's a entity missing on that, huh?
Yeah. Current.
Correct.
Yeah.
On your column there, Paul,
Yes, sir.
because that's a area of focus, I think, that needs to be added. Do you agree?
Yes, sir. And I appreciate that feedback. We'll definitely include it. I went back and forth on listing them as not to presume anything, but certainly with that perspective, we will add them on that list. Thank you.
And Paul, I appreciate you with that framing because we still as a board need to discuss the implications and all of the various and sundries about adding a new member.
Right.
Because we've changed a lot of that in the bylaws. And so there's a big conversation needs to be had around that.
Correct.
Yeah, appreciate the fact that you were very cognizant of saying, I can't presume that the board's going to make that, but that being said, yeah, I think in the future, if Corinth were to come on board, there'd be a funding column for them.
And the analysis should take that into consideration.
Yeah, we talked about it before about that being one of the decision gates. So I know Paul's got it on his radar. So, but I don't have a problem with
Whether they're
putting it in
members
here
or not, that.
Yeah, we need to know
those
both
are
options.
Separate, but they're also connected,
They're very
those
connected.
issues, so.
Part of the discussion previously was in the assumption that Corinth would come on board. One of the things that they could potentially pay for is some double tracking, because it may not be just around the Corinth station, it could be anywhere along the alignment to help us get down to Trinity Knolls sooner rather than later. So there's a nested set of decisions. We think the only way to really inform all this is to kind of get it all. What are the in the near term, I'll say the next 6 to 10 years, what are all the different options? How do they nest together to go out and competitively bid and get support not only regionally, but nationally for federal dollars? So the more shovel ready these projects are, and this is an attempt to try to get us there, the more competitive we are at securing federal funds to do projects.
Any other comments? Okay, continue.
Okay, next slide, please. So here's a view on timeline and what we believe are our next steps. Or I'm sorry, this is I'm skipping ahead to the next one. Here we are looking at why this is a good idea to undertake now and a good initiative to undertake now. We've got good momentum with our JROF conversation and our partners at DART on the long-term deal. The Silver Line, like we mentioned, is in the process of doing ongoing planning, engineering, and construction. We would not want to miss the opportunity to make complementary investments with them to avoid rework if we decide to do things after they've already made their investment. That's has the potential to cause projects cost more than they should. We see that Silver Line revenue service target date of the fourth quarter of 2024. That's sort of a North Star that everybody's aiming towards and really believe is a significant milestone for the region. So perhaps that informs our efforts. We have NCT COG right now doing if they haven't started it already, they will be very soon, a Denton County transit study. We want to make sure as we tell the story about how we're enhancing the value of the A train, that story shows up in all the right places to make sure that we're speaking with one voice as a region. And so we want to make sure that we're integrated in with that. And then the last item is that our federal funding streams that are available to us right now through all of the infrastructure money that's been approved so far is a finite period of time. And so now is really the time to jump in and begin to make our vision a reality. So the bottom, sorry?
To your number 4 point, the COG had reached out to me and drafted a letter and I just signed it, I guess on Friday, and went out to each of the individual mayors, alerting them of that. So that's live and that's out there.
Very good.
It's imminent.
Thank you. So the Gantt chart there at the bottom is really just intended as a conceptual representation of the timeline and of that an effort like this could take. And Mayor Gilmore, your question about how fast can we get going? we can talk about scoping and procuring an A-train optimization study. If time is of the essence, as it sounds like it is, then we would probably do well also because of LTK and all the work they've already done on the scope to give them a hard look at the award on the task order on the scope of work that we're developing. But we want to make sure that we've not presuming any outcomes there. And so we'll do our due diligence to make sure that's the right fit. But we would expect that study to take a period of time, maybe less than a year. We're working with them right now. We've had a number of conversations already. I've got another conversation with them on Thursday, and we'll talk about how expediently could the effort be done and what sort of interim milestones might give us enough information to execute on some of the projects that we know are going to be required. Then you see that ongoing in parallel is our board and the city of Corinth having a dialogue and making a decision about potential membership. If Corinth were to make a decision about membership, we heard them say that potentially they'd be doing that a year from now or 2 years from now. The long-term lease negotiations, we're going to expect to start those this summer, and those could take a year to be in place by 2023, summer of 2023. And then you see we've got a couple of different federal grant funding cycles there, because it's generally pretty tough to get a federal grant award on the first try. Let's assume we need 2 tries to do it, but we still see that we could, if we got a grant award on the first go around that happened sometime in 2023, 2024, we're looking at potentially we could have a station in Carrollton by 2025, 2026 timeframe. All these timelines, I think, can get better defined and more certain once we get our consultant underway and get a better view of how this study will proceed. And again, our next conversation in that regard is going to be Thursday this week. Any questions on that?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I have a question. Yes.
What is the role this consultant's going to do?
The consultant, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What the role of the consultant is to perform the operations analysis and the engineering analysis that would determine the program of projects that help the train move faster and take the train from Trinity Mills to Carrollton and to potentially bring on another station. And then what is the potential cost of those projects so that we can then determine what is our funding available, what's our funding need, and then go out and pursue that funding.
Do we not know that? Do we not know about what that stop, the delay in time that that's going to take? And we do have to pay somebody to tell us that? And do we not have cost estimates based on industry standards of what a double track is going to take or what? I mean, we can't do that in-house.
In short, the modeling and timetable sort of work that it takes to do this, no, we do not have it in-house. We do have, for instance, the study. Let's take the study for bringing the Corinth station online. We have a study that says these segments of double track could be implemented so as not to cause the A train to lose any service time on the existing schedule. But what we don't understand is how those same segments of double track may help us to get to Carrollton, because we can put additional train sets on the line to provide that Carrollton service, or how it increases timetable speed overall so that we can reduce our overall headways. And so each one of these studies was done with a specific objective in mind. What we need is to be able to tie them all together with one comprehensive view. And again, a year is very, very conservative, I believe. And what we'd like to do is be able to come back to the board in a future meeting very soon with a proposal that says, here's the cost and here's how long it would take.
There's a process called streamlining train movements. So depending on where you have the ability to pass, will dictate how fast you can get kind of leapfrog down to an end of the line. So if you can imagine, that's been modeled many times before we even deployed DCTA. as we talk about Corinth coming on and adding some double track, that timetable will change. But there's specifics on where you add track, at what speed you can traverse that track. And we haven't done any of that modeling from Training Mills down to Carrollton. So that's a piece that we would definitely need to look at. You have thoughts about how we might use existing resources a little bit different? We're certainly open to it.
Because it's, a lot of it is like modeling water lines, you know, you're adding links, and sometimes you get unintended consequence when you're adding these bypass lines, and you do have to run models on it. But I can see that, you know, we've done some of this work. There might be ways to take that same model and just add a little bit to it. Maybe as major change. But again, I do know that these models change. That's how these people make money, because models get updated. And one model is not quite the same as the
And we're
other.
not
There's smart people in this agency that should be able to know what some of the impacts would be if you have a train. If you're adding, I don't think it has to be totally refined down to the thing. And I don't know why we do all the modeling in advance or simultaneously with the conversations on the will of the city and what their financial capacity is. You know, I mean, do we need to have those conversations in advance to see if that's even a viable project? Or do we need to wait and see what the financial impact is? I think that's what we're saying here. Maybe we need to see what the financial impact would be for operational viewpoint. And then what would necessitate their participation.
Certainly the cost of getting down to Carrollton is not that well understood without doing some engineering.
Okay.
That's probably the largest cost segment of the whole thing. Adding some double track to help improve speed, to try to get down to whether it be have better time points and integration with the Green Line, or if we decide to get down to Carrollton, those are time points that we're more interested in, so that the trains actually, passengers aren't having to wait
Right.
as long. But if we decide to implement some double track now, let's say now, in the next 3 to 5 years,
Yeah.
and then we go to Carrollton, well, did we put the double track in the right place or not? To really, which connection is more important, Training Mills, Carrollton? Those are the types of discussions that need to be analyzed and debated and discussed with the board. We have a very small staff here. We don't have that type of technical expertise on staff intentionally, because we don't typically deal with these projects that often.
Y'all would roughly know what a double tracking costs. I mean,
We have
these are
an
things
estimate
that,
already for, yes.
okay.
Discussion.
Okay. Next slide. So in terms of our next steps, if the board is agreeable in general with the approach that we would want to scope the study for the A train and procure it, which would require us obviously to come back to the board with a clearer picture of the scope of that work and the cost of that work and the timeline of that work. We will continue to collaborate with DART on the engineering evaluation and requirements between Trinity Mills and downtown Carrollton, including their timing of their planned investment, so that we can make a decision in alignment with that. We want to continue talking to NCTCOG and make sure that they're aware of and aligned with our upcoming plans. And then, like we also said, beginning a conversation with the city of Carrollton, who already knows that this conversation is going on or is likely to come back up again, about what are their current views on the location of a station, what are their preferences for and desired outcomes for such a project, those sorts of things. In parallel, we are negotiating and executing a short-term lease with DART. You saw in the CEO weekly update, we just got word back from DART in the last week or two on their comments of the draft lease. We're in the process, or DART is in the process of procuring an appraisal of the A train corridor, including the segment from Trinity Mills down to Carrollton. And this is part of the requirements for us to do the long-term deal, especially because the Trinity Mills to Carrollton segment is going to be key to that long-term negotiation. We're looking at the execution of that long-term lease, like I said, sometime in the summer of 2023. And then this last item is that when we bring this back to the board, we'd like to have more conversation around the potential of an additional staff resource, an AVP of rail operations that the staff included back in March of 2020. There was an AVP rail operations person on staff, and then that position was eliminated following that person's departure in May of 2020. When we consider the transformation initiative that's afoot with our rail network, the requirements that we'll have for putting the vision together and telling the story and pursuing funding, including grant applications and those sorts of things, and advocating for the project, as well as making future decisions about the rolling stock and other things that we have in front of us for the future service to Carrollton. It seems that we would benefit from a senior level leader on that team, which is doing a very good job of making sure that our contractor runs the operation safely and effectively day to day. And so we'll bring that back for discussion with the board when we come together with our scope of work and proposal to move this forward. Any questions on that?
Questions, discussion?
Paul, you're just going to set the bar high for you here. I mean, we already completely outsource rail operations. I mean, what I'm looking at is you're asking for an AVP to oversee a contractor. I hope that's not all you're asking for.
Yes, sir. I understand. No, what I'm talking about is that as we think about having a person with the view, the big picture view of how our railroad is going to transform over the course of the next few years, we'd benefit from having a staff person who can identify what are the things that are going to make sure that we're successful, and avoiding the things that are make sure that we're not successful, because they're looking at that big picture day to day. Our rail contractor is part of our team. We also have the 3 staff members on the rail side from a budgetary operations and staff support perspective. But yes, we'll bring that back for the board's consideration when the scope is ready to go.
Other discussion items? Anything else on this item?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Board, we're at 12:10. Lunch is here. Is there a desire to take a 30-minute break for lunch? I think there is. So that being said, we will reconvene at 12:40 to return back to our meeting. Thank you. All right. So tell me when you start. Okay, we are reconvening the DCTA board meeting of March 7th. We will move on now to item number 8, which is update on the Burns property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide you an update on property that DCTA purchased at in the vicinity of our Old Town station that is currently on lease back to the original seller. We're reaching some milestone dates related to the expiration of that lease and have had some conversations with the developer who is agent that's representing the seller. And so I wanted to provide you an update today in anticipation of an action item at a future board meeting. I will say that right after this memo and agenda was published, we got additional correspondence from the seller's agent that clarified some of the target dates here. So if you see differences between what I'm saying and what's on the slide or what's in the memo, that's the reason. But we have reached consensus and alignment with the seller's agent on the path forward. And so that's what I'll speak to. This image at the right-hand side of this slide shows DCTA's property adjacent to and at the Old Town station. And then in the lower right of that exhibit, you see what is known as the Burns property, 2.5 acres, that was purchased back in the summer of 2020 in order to facilitate DCTA's development of a multimodal transit center in the vicinity of the Old Town station. You see at the details on the left that DCT executed a Federal Transit Administration grant for $11.3 million to acquire the property and construct that TOD. You see there that the real estate acquisition and relocation assistance was about $3.5 million, and we gave the seller a 2-year lease back with an option to extend 1 year. The first 2 years of the lease back are at no cost to the seller, so they do not pay a monthly rent back to DCTA. But the additional optional year, should they choose to exercise it, would cause a $14,000 per month lease rate through that additional 3rd year. The seller is to notify us 60 days prior to the expiration of that initial term, which is September 30th of this year, backed up 2 months. So that's July. They've contacted us already, and so we're well ahead of the game right now. And what they've asked for right now is only a waiver of the $14,000 per month lease rate. They have not asked actually to exercise the 3rd year of the lease term. One of the things we want to do is get the board's perspective on this, that if the board was agreeable to an approach whereby they would come back and ask for a 3rd year at no monthly cost, plus actually going ahead with the lease extension, if the board would like to entertain that option, we could certainly bring that forward. If the board would like to only entertain the potential waiver of the lease rate, should they choose to exercise the lease extension, we could also bring that back. So just wanted to get the board's perspective on this deal and understand, so we can understand what sort of approach to take with the seller.
So this is discussion so we can get direction. Is there a desire to give some type of a waiver? To see what people are thinking. And I guess I could start off by saying I think we should charge them something. I would maybe be willing to consider something less than 40,000, but I think we should charge them something. That's my initial thoughts. Begin the discussion from others.
That's more or less where I'm at on it as well. It seems like a bad look to let someone use publicly owned land for free.
We already gave them a great deal. Seems like we should charge something. Okay. Others?
I don't know, as a board member, it was an agreement that was made, And obviously things happen, but I think to be fair to our residents, to basically void what our agreement was for that, should they decide on a third year, I don't think is doing our citizens justice. And I may entertain a lesser lease rate, but certainly that would have to be discussed.
Paul, to clarify, it was 2 years seller lease back at 0, and it's just the third year was the optional one with the.
Yes, sir.
I think it'd be optional, but.
Yes, sir. That's
We
correct.
did have the 14,000 was in the sale agreement.
Yes, sir, that's correct. And the seller notes that they've experienced some delays in getting their new headquarters facility constructed. They had to unexpectedly extend a gas main to serve their new property. And so they've reached other delays and cost increases that are typical of what others have heard in the construction industry over the course of the last couple of years. So in terms of the reason or the background for their request, that's what they say is driving it.
And I certainly understand that. I think the reason, if I remember correctly, that when we've had this discussion, was that DCTA was not ready in the next couple of years to do anything with that property necessarily, but this was a disincentive to have them keep it for another year. So
That's correct.
that makes sense.
That is correct. Our understanding for their request is they, like everyone, were impacted by COVID. I know they've been working with the city to try to find a new location. They found one. Getting into or getting attached to the gas line has been apparently a challenge for them, but that was their request. So we're bringing it back to the board. I'm sorry, and then one last thing is we currently are not in a position at this point to decide how we're going to use the property. So it's not delaying any engineering or things, and just trying to be a good neighbor, a good citizen, a company within the city limits. We wanted to just bring this back to the board and provide.
Question for Joe. Why were those the initial 2-year period of lease back where we were not charging any rent at all? Why is that not considered an illegal gifting of public property?
There was additional consideration that was drafted into the contract at the time, so it's not one of the illegal gift of the property.
Okay.
It was part of the conversation. Probably. I don't have the original agreement with me to go back to what that.
It was a term for us to be able to acquire the property. They weren't necessarily looking to sell.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, part of
the
the
total consideration
do that.
in the purchase.
So I've been talking with our staff, and the Burns folks have been good about communicating. There is a little bit of concern that they might be looking at other options. So I would feel more comfortable with a 6-month with an optional 6-month, which effectively is similar to what you guys are asking for, which would be, a reduced rate. So that may be somewhere in there instead of, but I think we want to incentivize them to keep moving without giving them too long a leash. So that's what I was prepared to have a conversation on, would be a 6-month with a 6-month extension instead of the full 12. I don't know if we can or not, Joe, but that's what I'd like to offer. But I can totally understand wanting some sort of revenue piece in there. But they have been good at communicating. I think the market has been really challenging in multiple ways, but.
So I guess I'm hearing that there is a willingness to extend it, but for some rate. And that's kind of what I'm hearing. Nobody set a rate, just some type of rate. And that could be, you can ultimately work that out to say whatever. You can set it first, whatever. But yeah, there's some type of something.
You can
So
do an
it
estimate.
could be a reduced rate, or it could be a matter of time, 6 months, go on and then go with the way it was. So I think there's a couple of options. And then the other option is to charge them nothing, but I don't.
You can do an escalator by quarter. 0 first 3, 25%, 4 through 6, 100%.
So the board's not giving you direction. It's basically a negotiation. So
Understood.
go back to them and say, the board would be willing to consider something. You come back with what you think is a fair rate. And let them hear that there's options. It could be, a lower rate for the 12 months. It could be months 1, 2, and 3 at nothing, and then months 2, 3, and 4 at something and something and something. So we're kind of giving you broad direction. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. All right, that takes us now to agenda item number 9, staff briefing on recent inclement weather response and recovery. Brittany.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Brittany Farr, Director of Government Relations, and I am here today to provide you the staff briefing on the recent inclement weather recovery and response. Next slide, please. When I had initially planned this presentation, I intended on providing you a summary of our efforts around Winter Storm Landon, which affected the region the first week of February. But the universe saw fit to provide me with yet another opportunity to debrief you on our recent winter weather event, Winter Storm Oakley, which affected the North Texas region at the end of February, and is the reason we're all here today on March 7th. Hopefully I won't be taking up too much of your time today. One of our highest priorities during both winter weather events was to provide ample communication with you, our board, our member cities, and of course, our customers. But what I will do today is summarize our efforts around both winter weather events, some of our lessons learned, and then our next steps moving forward. To begin, I'd like to put some context around the decision-making during inclement weather events like the 2 winter storms we saw in the month of February. As a public service agency, we recognize that we provide critical lifeline services for many of our customers. And delivering service is always one of our highest goals. However, during winter weather events, especially icy winter weather events like we saw in the month of February, safety has to be our first priority. And so staff must strike a balancing act between providing these critical lifeline services to our customers, but also taking every precaution that we can to ensure the safety of staff, our operators, and of course, the traveling public. So the decision to suspend or modify service is never made lightly. We look at weather conditions, road conditions, operator availability, and also what our regional partners are doing across the Metroplex. Just some of the considerations that go into making any kind of operational determinations during inclement weather. Conditions can change rapidly, sometimes on the hour. And we do the best that we can to make decisions given the current situation. There is a saying in Texas that if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes and it will change. And that doesn't stop during winter weather events. So the ability to be flexible during these events is very important to us. So that being said, as the winter weather did approach the region on February 2nd, Winter Storm Landon, staff began meeting every 2 hours to monitor conditions and to make the appropriate plans to handle the inclement weather that was coming into the region. Each of our member cities was consulted to determine what needs, if any, they had during the winter weather event. The city of Denton did request that we provide shuttle services to their emergency warming and shelters. The city of Louisville requested a bus on standby in case any type of emergency shuttle or warming station was necessitated. And the city of Highland Village politely declined any assistance. They said that they thought they had it covered. So
On the evening of February 2nd, our contractors at Rio Grande Pacific began taking the steps needed to ensure A-train operations by lighting the switch heaters, which you can see here in the one slide I provided for you. No, our rail is not on fire. That is actually the switch heaters being lit to ensure that nothing freezes up, especially during prolonged episodes of below freezing weather. Crews also went to work laying biodegradable ice melt at the rail stations, bus shelters, parking lots, pathways, as well as storing that biodegradable ice melt on the vehicles to allow for spot treating throughout the run of service. On the morning of February 3rd, staff began meeting at 5 a.m. in the morning to evaluate conditions and make determinations on service. UNT had suspended classes, so the UNT shuttle services were suspended. At the request of our friends at VIA, we decided to suspend the GO Zone service, and that was done in accordance with similar decisions that were made by Trinity Metro and the City of Arlington to suspend their VIA provided service. We decided to continue to run the A-Train and our Connect service in the City of Denton, albeit on a Saturday schedule due to the limited number of operators that we had show up for their shifts. But we were able to continue to run paratransit service as normal, as well as that emergency shuttle service requested by the City of Denton, and then the warming bus on standby for the City of Louisville. As conditions deteriorated into Friday, I think we're all aware that our friends down south at Dallas Area Rapid Transit made the decision to suspend all of their services, including the bus shuttle that they were running to connect along the Green Line, which would connect to Trinity Mill Station and the A-Train. Without that regional connectivity to DART, we made the decision to cancel A-Train services on Friday. And as road conditions continue to deteriorate and become even more treacherous, the decision was made to suspend Connect service and shift those limited resources onto the Lifeline services. So on Friday, we were able to complete about 24 paratransit trips, almost exclusively to dialysis centers, as well as continue the emergency shuttle route. And while some may thumb their nose at the 24 dialysis trips that we provided on Friday, those are folks that may have experienced near fatal repercussions had that service not been running. That's 24 families that got to keep a loved one. And to be quite honest, that's why we get out of bed every day and come to work, is for those types of services. So I'm personally very proud of the staff and the operators for being able to get those emergency Lifeline services out on what was arguably the worst day of Winter Storm Landon. Moving into Saturday, we still saw hard freezes across the North Texas region, and went ahead and made the decision on Saturday to keep the Connect service and the A-Train service suspended. However, this was really VIA's opportunity to shine, and their flexibility and their service model made it to where we could run limited GO Zone service beginning at noon when the melt began, running through 7 o'clock before it started refreezing again. In that time, VIA completed almost 1,100 completed trips. And so kudos to them and their ability to get folks where they needed to go, and demonstrating their flexibility and again, providing value to the residents of the DCTA service area. By Sunday, we were back to normal. We all took a giant sigh of relief. That sigh of relief didn't last very long, because before we knew it, we were in preparations for Winter Storm Oakley, which struck the Metroplex the last week of February. Similar to Landon, our Rio Grande Pacific workers began activating the rail switch heaters the evening of Wednesday as the ice began to accumulate. UNT suspended classes at 5 p.m. that day, so we also made the determination to suspend our UNT shuttle services. And then again, at the request of VIA, and not dissimilar from our partners at Trinity Metro and the City of Arlington, suspended GO Zone service as 5 p.m. that day. Connect services and A-Train services finished their duration of their regularly scheduled shifts that evening. And then moving into Thursday, as ice continued to accumulate, we'd made the decision to continue A-Train service as usual. DART had committed to running the bus bridge along the Green Line, so there was still that regional connectivity that we needed to provide. We also anticipated running Connect services on a regular schedule. We plan to start at 10 a.m. to provide the ice a little bit of time to melt, but it did not melt. And so at our 5 a.m. call that morning, we did make the decision to shift our resources on Connect services. We suspended most of the Connect routes and utilized those operators to provide service along Route 7, which was still seeing pretty high ridership, as well as the paratransit service, and then the emergency shuttle service that we provided for the city of Denton, similar to Winter Storm Landon. By Friday, temperatures had warmed enough to continue normal operations across all modes. And hopefully now that it is March the 7th, we have seen our fair share of winter weather for 2022. And we have already begun evaluating lessons learned, best practices, and our next steps moving forward. A few things we've learned in this process that allowed us to be successful was the benefit of making decisions on a day-to-day basis rather than long-term decisions. As I mentioned, the weather conditions change rapidly, and allowing us to make those day-to-day decisions really allowed us to be flexible and deliver as much service as we felt safe for our customers. While none of us enjoyed those 5 a.m. calls, it absolutely was a benefit to the agency, to our member cities, and then to the customers. Fully engaging our partners in the process was another one of the best practices. Having calls with VIA, communicating with Rio Grande Pacific, communicating with NTMC really allowed them to be cued into our decision-making process and help us make some of those decisions about service through both winter weather events. And then one of the other best practices is communication. I apologize for the amount of emails that I sent you over those 2 winter storm periods, but I feel like the communication that we provided to you as a board, to our member cities, and then most importantly, our customers, is a hallmark of our plans moving forward in any kind of inclement weather situation. As these events become more frequent and more severe looking forward, we have already begun to identify potential opportunities for improvement, working with our partners at Rio Grande Pacific, NTMC, and VIA. Again, always balancing the safety of our customers, of our operators, but looking at ways that we can improve continuity of services in these type of winter weather events. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
No questions, but I just wanted to thank staff for going above and beyond during the weather events. And thank you in particular for that emergency shuttle that you provided in Denton. I know that made a big difference for a lot of folks.
I'd like to thank y'all as well. Paul was on our calls with multiple calls with the different leadership around the county, with the National Weather Service and others. I want to thank all the DCTA staff for all their good efforts. So thank you for being a part.
Thanks, George.
I really appreciate the context that we understand that these weather events will become more frequent. So that's, I think, great foresight.
I want to thank the board chair for sending an email to staff about his appreciation, recognizing that these events takes a village of people to address, and it was well received. So thank you.
Publicly, again, thank you all. I know very well how hard and long those hours are, and I appreciate it. So, on behalf of the board, I think you're hearing, we all appreciate your thank you.
Yeah, and I too want to thank staff. I know some other agencies were criticized for maybe the way they handled it. I appreciate that we got those people that needed to get where they needed to get. Those were life and death issues. And as I said in my reports to DRMC the other day, for those situations that are not really life and death situations, I would prefer that we err on the side of caution and safety than of loss of life and limb. So I appreciate what you guys do, and I hope you understand how much we appreciate it. And tried to express to other agencies that they made the right decisions. They have to make the right decisions at the time for what they believe, because if not, they will be responsible and held accountable for those things that happen. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. All right. Thanks, Brittany. We'll move on now to item number 10, discuss local and regional transportation updates and legislative issues. I'll just report that we will have an APTA legislative conference next week in Washington, D.C. And I'll be talking to Brittany and Paul, and the three of us will be going up to D.C. next week. And just be prepared to educate lawmakers on our needs here locally in Denton County. Diane, do you have anything to report on RTC?
So RTC, actually this week will be the first time in 2 years that we will actually meet in person.
We
They,
met in person in December.
huh?
We know-
Well, but at our office.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, we got together at the Irving, but this will be the first time we get back. And what they're gonna do is obviously have the board members there, and then I think other guests, there's another room that will be available, but I know everybody's excited to come back together. At our last meeting, February 10th, they posted the Star Local Media article on appointing Judge Eads as a board member. And DART presented with the regional van pool program, the vehicle revised. It's an action item that was related to the regional van pool program. And the North Texas Regional Van Program is operated by our 3 agencies, right? And DART, Trinity Metro, and DCTA. So the vans used in the program are available to a low monthly cost to riders and can seat up to 15 people. Well, DART recently notified us in Trinity Metro that they are terminating their agreement with their current van pool contractor and will be unable to provide service for 9 existing van pools in operation, as well as any new van pools in their designated region. So this item provides modification needed for DCTA and Trinity Metro to divide any new van pools that and to reassess our program to see who's going to take what. A question was asked of DART of when they believe they would be able to resume and what happened if they didn't resume. And I just offered that we're 3 agencies, we're working together, we'll figure this out like we have many things. So so I think it's fine. I think we'll be able to handle whatever comes out of that. We had our Dallas Regional Mobility Coalition meeting on Friday, and we discussed, I offered in my talk that the board had approved the changes to DCTA Connect services. A new route will also be being on March 14th. Staff's continuing to work on comprehensive operations. And then I wanted to remind them and all of us, actually it was last Friday, but on Friday, March 18th, DCTA will be celebrating Transit Employee Appreciation Day. So we're encouraging all to post on social media with their favorite drivers or administration employees, and then post it using the official hashtag Thanks DCTA. So we also, our guest speaker for that day was Speaker of the House, Dave Thielen, and it was a very interesting discussion. If y'all have time, y'all might want to go back and listen to it. But he talked about public education, criminal justice reform, healthcare, mail-in balloting, constitutional redistricting, and how that affected some of our areas. And he said, 139 people moved here in this last month to Texas. And so Michael Morrison is always talking about all these people. Michael Morris is always talking about all these people that are coming and how important it's going to be for us to make sure that we have our infrastructure set. So anyway, it was a really good discussion with our Speaker of the House and the sale of KCS going to Canadian company. I thought that was interesting. Have to look into that. And then DART announced that D-Leggett replaced Tim McKay on their with their not their board, their staff. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you. And I did all that without my.
Raymond, do you have anything?
Yes, one thing. For roughly 2 years, DCTA has been in partnership with DART's leadership team and Trinity Metro. We've been on calls. It was every day. Now it's weekly. Talking about COVID from the onstart of it. How do we address the ever-changing dynamics of COVID? We shared a lot of different thoughts about safety, what each transit agency was doing. We've all contributed to that. It really has helped build regional partnerships, and it's been an honor to serve on those Monday or Friday calls. They start at 7:30. And what's so nice about it is that we're all starting to experience the same thing that we're seeing on the county level, which is a significant reduction in COVID and the impact to our communities and impact to transit. You're recently hearing from the federal government a push to return back to work for companies. That certainly will help bring transportation back into the forefront in transit. We are still under a mask mandate, at least through March 18th. It's a federal mandate for transportation and transit. We're not sure how that's going to be addressed, but we will continue to have to abide by that at not only all of our transit centers and the rail facility, but at our operating facilities, because they are a hub for operating personnel and dispatchers and the like. But I just wanted to offer my thanks to the other transit agencies. It's been great to work with them in collaboration. They're going to continue to have these calls as far as I know. But just wanted to share with you that it's been very rewarding, and I think we were able to keep a lot of operators and staff safe through this whole process. That's all I had to share.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes item 10. I'm going to go ahead and skip item 11 until the end of the meeting. So let's move on to informational reports. First one is monthly sales tax receipts.
I don't think we were planning on making.
Were you planning to make any reports
presentations
on
these
this?
unless there's questions.
Okay.
I think there's one item, if Marissa's available to talk to it.
Yes, sir.
See which one. You wanna
And if y'all
address
could go to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you.
Included in the packet is the proposed FY23 budget calendar. We've included just a slide here that shows the specific dates of note. We are proposing one additional special called meeting on June 16th for a budget workshop, and that would be separate from the regular June board meeting. And then the rest of the dates are highlighted here. We typically include any future budget discussions as part of the regularly scheduled board meeting. So that full calendar is included in your packet. If you would just double check those dates for us and let Keisha know if you have any issues with those dates in terms of scheduling, so that we can pivot accordingly. And otherwise, that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions about number one. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to y'all.
We don't have any RTC meetings on this.
On 16th?
Thursday, yeah.
Check for that. Any questions on this item? Okay, just let Keisha know if you guys have any concerns on the 16th. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to future agenda items and board requests. So we already touched on some board requests when we were discussing the
the issue on the go zone proposed rate. So any other items?
I believe Board Member Eads had also requested a standing item to discuss public outreach, which I would
Have we
also
captured that as well?
like to see.
Capture that, okay. Is there any other board member requests?
I'd like to get an update on the Trinity Metro bus operations outsourcing. See where we are on that. And then there are some small segments of Louisville. I'd sent that map over, I think last month or the month before. There just seemed to be in Scrivener type errors because of the nature of the neighborhoods. So I'd like to see about getting that an action item to expand to cover those missing neighborhoods, or explain to me why they're not. Because I mean, they're literally like a city block, like they forgot which road was Louisville and which road was Flower Mound. And then I would like to see at some point where we are on the multi-vendor unified app. Since we brought that conversation up, and it seems that, you know, I'm a little confused on where that is and where it could go with GoPass. So, because we had, the competitor that one of the reasons we didn't take them is because they didn't have any integrations at all. So I would like to see where we can go, where that needs to be, if we can get an update there.
Other board members' requests? Seeing any?
So, Mr. Chair, when we started meeting virtually, we stopped our Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to reinstate those.
That's a good point. Yes.
And we have our flags.
That's a good point. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
Are the staff reports from their desks something that we did just because of COVID, or do they give them in person before?
We've given them in person. I'm only here since COVID.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think it would be nice to have, I think it'd be nice to have the individual presenters in here. Ma'am,
I think they would like that.
yeah, I think it,
was a space issue.
sure. I think they could come in and as needed.
And on that note, you still want to continue with allowing public comments over the Zoom, or whatever we're using, if you want to go back to only public comments here.
I would like for our meetings to be as accessible as possible. And I would like to allow the public to make comments in whatever way they prefer.
I don't have an issue with that either. My question though is, I think state law requires that we have to be able to see them.
Yeah, for the public comments, if there's public comments, we can actually, we're not taking any action on them. We can actually, there's the public, we can have them just like today. We do say in here that they have to have a video, and you heard, it was a clarification since it's not an action item, but they can
Just be audio.
Yeah, it's up to you. You can still require both. A lot of municipalities that are doing it are requiring both, so you can see them and they can see you. You want to see them. That's entirely up to you.
I'll just share that Denton doesn't require any video. We allow callers and have even since before COVID, and I'm fine with audio only.
Yeah, I read the line at the beginning, so I thought if we were breaking state law by doing that, but if we're not, then no, I don't have an issue. Super, thank you.
I think there's consensus that the board just says, okay, we'll continue to allow that. Let the raise your hand function. Yeah, yeah. All right, I don't see anything else. The next board meeting is March 24th, 2022. The next item is report on items of community interest. Do we have any items of community interest? Shall I read this to the, or we're good? Recognition of individuals, reminders about DCTA and member city events, information about community events, etc. But okay, if there's nothing to report on this item, then what we'll do now is we're going to convene an executive session. And let me read this. The Board of Directors will convene in closed executive session pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Codes. Personal matters, deliberate the evaluations, duties, and employment of Chief Executive Officer. At 1:25 p.m. 40 members and alternates, and Mr. Suarez and our legal counsel.
Chair, please give me a moment. We have one alternate that is virtual, so he's going to have to join us in the executive session link. So,
Okay.